The scent of roast chicken filled the dining room, but my stomach was a knot of ice. It was supposed to be a celebration. 6 weeks ago, I had given one of my kidneys to my mother-in-law, Brenda. Tonight was the first time she was well enough for a proper family dinner. She sat at the head of the table, her cheeks rosy with renewed health, looking more vibrant than I had seen her in years. I, on the other hand, felt a dull, constant ache in my side, a permanent reminder of the piece of me that was now inside her, keeping her alive. My husband, Tom, had been quiet all evening. He had refilled everyone's wine glass but mine, and seemed to be studying the pattern on his plate with intense interest, avoiding my gaze at all costs. My son, Alex, who was 15, sat beside me, listlessly poking at his potatoes. He could feel the tension, too. It was a thick, suffocating blanket that had settled over our celebration. Finally, after the plates were cleared, Tom took a deep breath, the kind of breath a person takes before jumping off a cliff. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a thick, white envelope. He slid it across the polished wood of the table with a quiet shh. It stopped right in front of my plate. "What's this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, though I felt a cold dread begin to creep up my spine. "I think we both know this has been coming for a long time, Kate," he said, his voice flat and empty of any emotion. He finally looked at me then, but his eyes were like a stranger's. "I want a divorce." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. My gaze dropped from his face to the envelope. "Divorce papers." My hands trembled as I looked from the papers back to his cold, emotionless face. Then I looked at Brenda. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't sad. She was smiling. A wide, triumphant grin spread across her newly healthy face, her eyes glittering with a malice I had never seen so openly before. "You should be thankful, dear," she said, her voice as smooth as silk. "We're letting you go. You've served your purpose. You were never really family, and it's time we all stopped pretending." Served my purpose. The words echoed in the silent room. I had given a part of my own body to this woman, a piece of myself that I could never get back. I had endured the surgery, the pain, the difficult recovery, all because I thought I was saving our family, and now she was telling me I was being let go, like an employee whose project was finished. A sharp intake of breath came from beside me. It was Alex. "Dad? Grandma? What are you doing?" he asked, his voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and a fury that was just starting to simmer. Tom waved a dismissive hand, not even looking at his own son. "This is grown-up business, Alex. Stay out of it." But I wasn't looking at Tom anymore. I wasn't looking at Brenda's cruel, smiling face. I was looking at my son. And in his dark eyes, I saw the same shock and pain that I felt tearing through my own heart, but underneath it, I saw something else ignite. It was a fire, a cold, hard fire of anger that I had never seen in my sweet, gentle boy before. In that horrible, heart-shattering moment, I knew I wasn't entirely alone, and they had absolutely no idea what they had just unleashed. 6 months earlier, the house had been filled with a very different kind of tension. It was the quiet, heavy tension of despair. Brenda's kidneys were failing. She was a shadow of her former self, weak and pale, always tired, and tied to the relentless schedule of a dialysis machine 3 times a week. The doctors had put her on the transplant list, but the wait was long, and we were all haunted by the unspoken fear that she didn't have that much time. Tom was a wreck. His family, a small, tight-knit group, felt like it was falling apart at the seams. His father had passed away years ago, leaving Brenda as the family's matriarch. Tom's only brother, Michael, had been tested as a potential donor, but was ruled out due to his own health issues. Tom himself was tested next, a week of agonizing waiting, only to find out he wasn't a match. The feeling of helplessness in our home was a physical presence, suffocating us all. I had always felt like a bit of an outsider in Tom's family. They were polite to me, of course, but there was an invisible wall I could never seem to break through. I was the girl from the wrong side of the tracks who had married their golden boy. I loved Tom, and I adored our son Alex, but I still craved the kind of close-knit family I had never had. Seeing them all in so much pain, seeing the foundation of their world crumbling, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just stand by and watch. "Test me," I told Tom one evening, as he was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a pile of medical bills. He looked up, his eyes clouded with exhaustion and confusion. "What? Kate, no, you don't have to do that." "That's too much to ask." "I want to," I insisted, taking his hand. It felt cold and limp in mine. "She's my family too. She's Alex's grandmother. I have to at least try." A week later, we got the call that changed everything. I was a perfect match. The news spread through the family like a wildfire, burning away the despair and replacing it with a startling, intense wave of gratitude. Suddenly, the polite distance was gone. Brenda wept on the phone, her weak voice cracking as she called me her guardian angel. Tom held me so tight I could barely breathe, burying his face in my hair and telling me over and over again that I was saving them all, that I was a saint. For the first time in 15 years of marriage, I felt like I truly belonged. I was no longer Kate, the outsider. I was Kate, the hero who would save them. They treated me like I was made of glass. Brenda, who used to find subtle ways to criticize my cooking, now told everyone I was a gourmet chef. Tom, who often worked late and spent weekends playing golf, started coming home early just to sit with me, asking if I needed anything. They promised me the world. "After this is over, Kate," Tom had said, his eyes shining with what I thought were unshed tears of gratitude, "we'll take that trip to Italy you've always dreamed of. Anything you want. You are giving my mother her life back. There is nothing I wouldn't do for you." I soaked up their gratitude like a dry sponge. This was what I had always wanted: to be needed, to be essential, to be loved unconditionally by a whole family. I believed every word, every promise. I believed I was the key to their happiness, the one person who could piece their broken family back together. 2 months later, I was in a hospital gown, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hopeful excitement. The nurse came in with a clipboard, her smile kind and reassuring. "Just a few more consent forms to sign, Mrs. Davis," she said. I took the pen she offered, my hand surprisingly steady. I looked down at the forms, at the long list of risks and potential complications, but I didn't see the words. I saw Brenda's smiling face at future family dinners. I saw Tom looking at me with love and admiration. I saw a long and happy future where I was finally, truly, a part of the family. With a heart full of hope, I signed my name. The surgery was a success, but the aftermath was brutal. Waking up in the recovery room was like surfacing from a deep, dark ocean into a world of blinding light and pain. A deep, searing fire burned in my side, a pain so intense it seemed to have its own heartbeat. The doctors assured me that the surgery had gone perfectly for both me and Brenda, but my recovery would be slow and difficult. Brenda, with her new, healthy kidney working perfectly, was already feeling better, her color returning within days. I, on the other hand, felt like I had been hit by a truck that had then backed up and hit me again. Brenda was discharged after a week, smiling and waving as Tom wheeled her out of the hospital. I had to stay for 2 long, painful weeks. Tom visited every day at first. He brought flowers that wilted in their vases and magazines I was too tired to read. He would sit by my bed, his face a mask of perfect concern, but his eyes were always somewhere else. As my recovery dragged on, his visits became shorter, more perfunctory. He seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone, tapping out messages with a new, nervous energy. "Is everything okay?" I asked him one afternoon, my voice weak. "It's just family business," he said, patting my hand without looking at me. His touch was brief and impersonal. "My Uncle Robert is very sick. I'm handling his estate, and it's a lot of stress." When I was finally discharged, I expected to be cared for, to be looked after like they had promised. But the house was quiet and strangely empty. Tom was barely there. He would leave before I woke up and come home long after I had fallen into an exhausted sleep. On the rare occasions I saw him, he'd claim he was overwhelmed with his uncle's affairs. I spent most of my days alone in our big house, shuffling from the bed to the sofa and back again, my side aching with every single step. I was weak, in constant pain, and lonelier than I had ever been. The promises of gratitude and care had evaporated into thin air. One night, about a month after the surgery, I couldn't sleep. The pain was a dull, throbbing ache that no amount of medication could touch. I gave up on rest and decided to get a glass of water, hoping it might help. As I walked slowly down the hallway, I saw a light on under the door to Tom's study. I heard his voice, low and hushed. He was on the phone. I paused, leaning against the wall, not wanting to interrupt what sounded like a serious conversation. "Yes, Uncle Robert," Tom was saying, his voice full of a strange, suppressed excitement. "The good news is, Mom is doing fantastic. The doctors say the new kidney is working perfectly. She's in perfect health now." There was a pause. I could hear the faint, crackling voice of his uncle on the other end. "Yes, I understand," Tom continued. "I'll have my lawyer send over the final medical certificates tomorrow. I know it was your condition for the inheritance." Condition. Inheritance. The words hit me like ice water. Tom then laughed, a low, triumphant sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Of course. We'll see you next month to sign the final papers. Thank you again, Uncle. This inheritance, it's going to change everything for us." I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle a gasp. Uncle Robert was Brenda's older brother, a reclusive, difficult man who was rumored to be incredibly wealthy. I had only met him once, at our wedding. Inheritance. A condition. My mind started racing, piecing together the chilling fragments. He needed medical certificates confirming Brenda was in perfect health. My sacrifice hadn't been about saving Brenda's life. It had been about a medical certificate. My kidney wasn't a gift of life. It was the key to a safe. It was a cold, calculated business transaction. They had used me. They had used a piece of my own body to get their hands on a fortune. I stumbled back to my bedroom, my legs barely holding me up. The physical pain in my side was nothing compared to the agony that was tearing through my heart. I collapsed onto my bed, the terrible truth washing over me in a cold, dark wave. I hadn't saved my family. I had just made them rich. And I had a sickening feeling that my part in their story was now over. When I came home from the hospital, I was a ghost. I moved through the rooms of my own house silently, the constant ache in my side a dull echo of the sharp, new pain in my heart. I tried to act normal. I smiled when I was supposed to smile. I asked Tom about his day. I told him I was feeling better, even when I wasn't. But something inside me was broken. My son, Alex, was the first to notice. He was a quiet, observant boy, with my eyes and a clever mind that missed nothing. He would watch me from across the dinner table, his brow furrowed with a worry that seemed too heavy for a 15-year-old. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked one evening, after Tom had once again left the table to take a business call. "I'm fine, sweetie," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." He didn't look convinced. He started watching them, too. He noticed the way his father and grandmother would exchange smug, secretive glances when they thought I wasn't looking. He heard the way they celebrated Brenda's miraculous recovery, but never once mentioned the sacrifice I had made. The house was filled with their happy, triumphant energy, while a dark cloud of sadness seemed to follow me everywhere. Alex saw it all. The breaking point for him came about a week before that final, terrible dinner. He was in his room, supposedly doing his homework, when he heard his grandmother come into the kitchen just below his window. She was on the phone, her voice loud and careless. Alex crept to his open window and listened. "Oh, it was perfect, Judith," Brenda was saying, followed by a loud, harsh laugh. "The fool actually did it. She signed the papers and gave it up without a second thought." Honestly, some people are so desperate to be loved. Alex's blood ran cold. He knew she was talking about his mom. "Tom is handling the final details with Robert's lawyers now," Brenda continued, her voice dripping with greed. "Just a few more weeks until the papers are signed, and we get the money. Then we can finally get rid of her. Tom can find a new wife, someone more suitable, and we can send the boy off to a good boarding school, get him away from her influence." Horrified, Alex's hands started to shake. He looked at his phone, lying on his desk. Acting on pure instinct, he quietly grabbed it, opened the voice recorder app, and pressed the red button. He held the phone near the window, capturing the rest of his grandmother's cruel conversation. He recorded her talking about the divorce, about how they had planned it all from the beginning, about how my gift was nothing more than a stepping stone to a life of luxury. When the call was over, Alex stopped the recording. He sat on his bed, his heart pounding in his chest, staring at the little audio file on his phone. He now held a terrible, ugly secret. He knew he couldn't tell me, not yet. He didn't want to break my heart all over again. But he held on to that recording like a weapon. He didn't know when or how he would use it, but he knew one thing for sure. He was not going to let them hurt his mom anymore. The invitation to the celebratory dinner felt like a summons. "Mom is feeling so much better," Tom had said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "She wants to have a proper family dinner to thank you." I knew it was a lie. There was no gratitude in this family, only greed. But I agreed to go. I had to see this twisted play through to its final act. As I got ready, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. There were dark circles under my eyes, and my face was pale. The surgery had taken a toll on me. I chose a simple blue dress, one of Tom's old favorites. It hung loosely on my frame. I was playing the part of the devoted wife, the selfless daughter-in-law, one last time. Walking into the dining room felt like walking onto a stage. Brenda was glowing, basking in the attention. Tom was playing the role of the doting son. Only Alex, sitting beside my empty chair, looked like he was at a funeral. Our eyes met for a second, and in his gaze I saw a silent promise of support that gave me a flicker of strength. The dinner was a masterclass in deception. Brenda talked about her newfound energy, the trips she was planning to take. Tom talked about a new car he was thinking of buying. They spoke of a bright, shiny future, a future that I knew didn't include me. They were so wrapped up in their victory that they didn't notice the cold, watchful silence from my end of the table. They didn't notice that I was not a victim anymore. I was a spectator, watching them build their own trap. Finally, the moment came. The plates were cleared. The air grew thick with anticipation. Tom cleared his throat and reached into his jacket. I knew what was in the thick, white envelope before he even placed it on the table. Divorce papers. He slid it across the table. It stopped in front of me, a final, insulting offering. "I think we both know this has been coming for a long time, Kate," he said, the practiced lines falling easily from his lips. "I want a divorce." Brenda leaned forward, her eyes glittering with malice, her face alight with a cruel, triumphant grin. "You should be thankful, dear," she purred. "We're letting you go. You've served your purpose. You were never really family, and it's time we all stopped pretending." They waited. They expected tears. They expected me to break down, to beg, to cause a scene. They expected the weak, desperate woman they had used for so long. I didn't give them the satisfaction. I looked down at the papers, then back up at their smug faces. I let the silence stretch for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then, I gave them a small, cold smile. My voice, when I finally spoke, was calm and clear. "Is this really how you want to do this?" I asked. The surprise on their faces was immensely satisfying. They had expected a victim. They had no idea they were facing a judge. The look of confusion on their faces was priceless. Tom and Brenda exchanged a quick, uncertain glance. This was not going according to their script. They had expected tears, pleading, maybe even a dramatic exit where I would run from the room sobbing. My quiet, cold question had thrown them completely off balance. "What do you mean, how we want to do this?" Tom stammered, his bravado faltering for the first time. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "It's done, Kate. It's over." "Is it?" I asked, my voice remaining calm and even. I leaned forward slightly, resting my hands on the table, feeling a strange new power coursing through me. "You see, I don't think it is. I think this is just the beginning. Brenda scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. She recovered her composure much faster than Tom. Oh, don't be ridiculous. You have nothing. You'll sign the papers, take the small settlement Tom is so generously offering, and you will leave quietly. You wouldn't want to make a scene. A scene? I repeated, a small, humorless laugh escaping my lips. The sound seemed to startle them. Brenda, you have no idea the kind of scene I am about to make. I looked from her face, now tightening with annoyance, to Tom's, which was pale and uncertain. I know about Uncle Robert. The color drained from their faces. It was as if I had pulled a pin from a grenade and was holding it in the middle of their perfect dining room. They were completely, utterly silent, their smug expressions wiped clean, replaced by raw shock. I know that your inheritance depended on Brenda being in good health, I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. I felt as if I were standing up after being knocked down for years. I know that my kidney wasn't a gift of life for you. It was a key. It was a business transaction to get your hands on his money. You didn't want a family member. You wanted a spare part. Tom finally found his voice, a weak, sputtering protest. That's crazy. You're making that up. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. The surgery must have affected you. Am I? I said, raising an eyebrow. I let my gaze settle on him, unblinking. I know that all your late-night business was just coordinating with his uncle's lawyers. I know that this whole performance, this entire marriage, has become a lie. You preyed on my desire for a family, and you manipulated me into giving you a piece of my own body, all for money. Brenda, ever the fighter, sneered at me, her face a mask of ugly defiance. The shock was wearing off, replaced by her usual venom. Prove it, she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. It's your word against ours. Who do you think a judge is going to believe? A sad, hysterical woman who is bitter about a divorce, or a grieving, respectable family? You have no proof. She thought she had me cornered. She thought it was her final, winning move. The checkmate. But she was wrong. I just smiled, a real, genuine smile this time, feeling the full weight of the trap I was about to spring. You're right, Brenda, I said softly, my voice carrying a strange lightness. I don't have the proof. I turned my head and looked at my son, who had been watching this entire exchange with a fierce, protective glint in his eyes. He met my gaze, and I gave him the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. Alex does. Every head in the room swiveled to face Alex. He had been so quiet, a silent observer at the edge of the storm. Now he was the center of it. Tom and Brenda stared at him, their expressions a mixture of confusion and annoyance. They saw him as a child, a pawn to be moved around their chessboard. Alex, this has nothing to do with you, Tom snapped, trying to regain control and dismiss his son with a wave of his hand. Go to your room. Your mother is not well. But Alex didn't move. He stood up slowly, his movements calm and deliberate. In that moment, he wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man, standing up to protect his mother. His face was set with a maturity that was far beyond his 15 years. He looked taller, stronger. You're right, Dad, Alex said, his voice clear and steady, with no trace of a tremor. It was the voice of someone who knew they held all the cards. Mom doesn't have proof. He reached into his pocket. But I do. He took out his phone. His thumb moved across the screen, and he pressed play. Brenda's voice, loud and clear, filled the dead silence of the room. It was the recording from his bedroom window, a ghostly echo of her triumph from a week before. Oh, it was perfect, Judith. Her recorded voice cackled, a sound that now seemed monstrous. The fool actually did it. She signed the papers and gave it up without a second thought. Just a few more weeks until the papers are signed, and we get the money. Then we can finally get rid of her. Tom can find a new wife, someone more suitable, and we can send the boy off to a good boarding school. The recording continued. every cruel, greedy word echoing off the walls of the elegant dining room. It was a confession, in her own triumphant voice, of their entire disgusting plan. Tom and Brenda were frozen in horror. Their faces had gone from smug to shocked, to a pasty, sickly gray. They were utterly exposed, not by a lawyer or a judge, but by the very boy they had planned to cast aside. When the recording finished, Alex simply put his phone back in his pocket. He looked at his grandmother, his eyes filled not with anger, but with a cold, quiet disappointment that was somehow even more damning. He didn't have to say a word. The recording had said it all. The aftermath was swift and total. My lawyer, armed with Alex's undeniable recording, didn't just file for divorce. He filed a lawsuit for fraud, conspiracy, and emotional distress. Faced with irrefutable proof of their scheme, Tom and Brenda crumbled. They gave me everything I wanted, the house, a generous settlement, full custody of Alex, just to avoid the public humiliation of having that recording played in a courtroom. The best part, however, came from Uncle Robert. When my lawyer discreetly sent him a copy of the recording, he was horrified. He had been lied to, manipulated by his own sister and nephew. Tom had painted me as a difficult, unstable woman who was making Brenda's life miserable. Uncle Robert immediately flew to see us. He apologized to me, his old eyes filled with a genuine sadness. He then rewrote his will on the spot. Brenda and Tom got nothing, not a single penny. Instead, his entire massive fortune was placed into a trust for Alex's future, with me as the sole trustee to manage until Alex turned 25. Months later, Alex and I were sitting at that same dining room table. The house was ours now, quiet and peaceful. The heavy, dark furniture was gone, replaced with bright, comfortable things that felt like us. We were helping Alex study for a history test, laughing as he struggled to remember a specific date. "You know, Mom," he said, looking up from his book, a small smile on his face. "That was the scariest thing I've ever done. Standing up to them like that." I reached across the table and took his hand, my heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost hurt. "It was the bravest thing I've ever seen," I told him, my voice thick with emotion. My kidney donation had been built on a lie, a cruel trick to steal a fortune. But in the end, it had saved a life after all. It had saved mine. And it had revealed the true nature of my son, a quiet boy with the heart of a lion. We had lost the family I thought I always wanted, but we had found a much stronger one in its place. Just the two of us, finally free, secure, and ready to face the world together.